Today's brief has been created with open source information readily available on the internet as well as books. However, take it with a pinch of salt because some aspects have been kept secret due to said country's Official Secrets Act, and sometimes Wikipedia is probably the best place to find the information. So sit back, relax, and let's get into today's briefing. The Fletcher class destroyer would turn out to be the staple of US destroyers in the Second World War and slightly after. Their origin could be traced to a general board study conducted in 1940, which focused on a replacement to the preceding Sims, Bensons, and its derivatives. The two main issues with the preceding class were the lack of speed and the greater issue of stability. There was an idea that these vessels would be needed to keep up with carriers and battleships currently on the drawing boards at the time. Multiple different designs would be drawn up, rejected, and drawn some more before a new design would be approved for further development. 3 such designs were selected to progress with. The characteristics for these vessels would be a flush deck hull of 2,050 tons, mounting 5 5-inch 38 dual-purpose single guns, 1 single 1.1-inch anti-aircraft gun, and 2 quintuple torpedo tubes. This initial requirement would lead to the design that we know of today. The design would bring over some similarities from the Benson class, bringing over the same bridge structure with a rounded front. However, latter ships, in some literature, would be classified as an improved Fletcher class based off the fact they have a squarish bridge, but more on that later on. The design process would finish on February 12, 1941, with destroyers 445 plus 6 other vessels being ordered in 2 batches. The first batch being the 1940 to 1941 program, or the Tranche 1 vessels. Batch 2 would be classified as the 1942 tranche, or the improved Fletcher class. It would take until October 2nd for the lead ship to be laid down, but 3 other vessels would be laid down beforehand. The first 4 ships, Fletcher, Radford, Jenkins, and La Valette, would be built by the Federal Shipyards in New Jersey, with Fletcher and Radford being laid down on October 2nd, 1941. Jenkins and La Valette would be laid down on November 27th, 1941. Hulls 5, 6, and 7 would be laid down on March 3rd and the latter on the 30th of April, with the names Nicholas, O'Bannon, and Chevier respectively. The ships of the class would be 114.8 metres long, have a beam of 12 metres and a draft of 5.3 metres. They would displace 2,050 tons standard and increasing to 2,500 tons at full load. The ships would be powered by 4 oil-fired boilers, powering 2 General Electric geared turbines, powering 2 3-bladed propellers at 60,000 shaft horsepower for 36.5 knots on trials. Range would be 5,500 nautical miles at 15 knots, or from Pearl Harbor to Guam via Tokyo. So a pretty decent range. The crew complement would consist of 329 officers and enlisted personnel. The weapons fits on these ships would vary depending on selected vessels, but it would usually consist of 5 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns located in A, B, Q, X, and Y locations. These weapons were capable of firing out to 8.98 nautical miles. Additionally to this, 2 quintuple 21-inch torpedo tubes capable of hurling a 7.3 meter long Mark 15 torpedo off board. These torpedoes were fired from a Mark 14 mount between the funnels and a Mark 15 mount after the funnels. The torpedo had a range of about 6,000 yards at 45 knots, 10,000 yards at 33.5 knots, and finally 15,000 yards at 26.5 knots. In terms of anti-air capabilities, the usual armament consists of 1 1.1-inch 75 caliber gun, the so-called Chicago Piano, medium-range cannon, and about 6 single 20mm Oerlikons, with ranges of about 3.4 and 2.37 nautical miles respectively. But this would change with the first ships joining the fleet in 1942, and as such, the 1.1s would be replaced with a dual 40mm Bofors cannon, which was capable out to 5.43 nautical miles. This weapon system gave an increase in rate of fire and weight of shot downrange. In the anti-submarine warfare department, the ship's standard layout was 2 Mark III depth charges on the fantail, each holding 10 Mark 9 depth charges each. Additionally, 3 Mark VI K gun launchers were also positioned forward on the quarterdeck, port and starboard. Rounding out the weapons, it's time to talk about the World War II sensor fits. The ships would be fitted with an SC early warning surveillance radar, with ranges between 30 and 75 nautical miles, depending on atmospherics and the selective radar fit. Additionally, the ships would be fitted with an SG Surface Search Echo Foxtrot band radar. Fire control for the ship's weapons consisted of a Mark 37 director, which consisted of a Mark I fire control computer, the Mark IV fire control director and radar, which would be changed over time with a new parabolic emitter. Sonar systems consisted of a hydrophone system and an integrated active sonar system. Please note that the weapons and sensor fits diverge and are different due to large numbers of vessels in the class and their long service careers. So the Fletcher class would end up being a 145 strong class, separated into 99 original vessels, or the 1940 to 1941 program, consisting of the following vessels built from each yard. From the Boston Naval Yard, you had the USS Bennett, Charette, Corner, Fulham, Guest, Hall, Harridan, Hudson, and Hutchins. From the Charleston Naval Yard, you had the USS Bell, Burns, Izard, Paul Hamilton, Stanley, Pringle, and Stevens. From the Puget Sound Naval Yard, you had the USS Halford, Lutz, the ex-Manfield USS Hart, Howarth, Killen, Metcalf, and Willie. From the Bath Iron Works, you had the USS Abbott, Anthony, Brienne, Converse, Conway, Coney, Eaton, Eben, Foote, Nicholas, Hale, O'Bannon, Sigourney, Stemble, Taylor, Terry, Wadsworth, Strong, Chevier, De Haven, Spence, Thatcher, and Walker. From the Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in New Jersey, you had Fletcher, Jenkins, Levalliette, Phillip, Radford, Renshaw, Ringgold, Soufflet, Stroider, Sigsbee, and Waller. From the Bentham Shipbuilding Corporation in San Francisco, you had Amon, Hazelwood, Heerman, McCord, Miller, the ex-Beatty USS Malani, the Owen. Additionally, the Stephen Potter, USS The Sullivans, the Fletcher, not the Arleigh Burke, the Tingy, the Trantham, the Twining, the Abner Reed, the Bush, the Howell, and the Yarnell, or Yarnell. From the Bentham Shipbuilding Corporation in Staten Island, you had the Bach, the Bale, the Daly, the Isherwood, the Brownson, the Luce, and the Kimberley. From the Bentham Shipbuilding Corporation in San Pedro, you had Boyd, Bradford, Brown, and the Cowell. From the Seattle Tacoma Shipbuilding Corporation, you had the USS Franks, Haley, Laws, Pritchett, Robinson, Ross, Rowe, Smalley, Stoddard, Watts, Johnston, Haggard, Mawson, and Wren.
5 minutes later.
From the Consolidated Steel Corporation in Orange, Texas, the Ullick, Charles Osborne, Claxon, Dyson, Harrison, John Rogers, McKee, Murray, Sproatson, Wicks, William D. Porter, and the Young. From the Gulf Shipbuilding Corporation in Chickasaw, Alabama, you have the USS Caps, Evers, David W. Taylor, and John D. Henley. For the improved Fletchers, or the 1942 program, there are 53 such vessels. These are with the square bridges, designed to help with the effective fire of anti-aircraft. So, These vessels again would be sorted into place of build. So from the Bath Iron Works, you have USS Copperton, Cogsworth, Ingersoll, Knapp, Mertz, Norman Scott, Remy, and USS Wadley. From the Bentham Shipbuilding Corporation at San Francisco, you have the USS Stockholm and the USS Wedderburn. From the Bentham Shipbuilding Corporation in San Pedro, you have the USS Cassin Young, Hopewell, Irwin, Porterfield, and Callahan and Preston.
5 hours later.
From the Bethlehem Shipbuilding Corporation at Staten Island, you have the Benham, the Charles J. Badge, Colohan, Cushing, Halsey Powell, Monson, Picking, and Ullman. From the Boston Naval Yard, you have the Bennon, the Halligan, the Haywood L. Edwards, Newcomb, and the Richard L. Larry. From the Charleston Naval Yard, you have the Albert W. Grant, the Twig, and the Bryant. From the Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in New Jersey, you have the USS Black, Chauncey, Clarence K. Bronson, the Bullard, the Cotton, the Dashell, the Dorch, the Gatling, the Haley, the Hickox, the Hunt, the Kidd, the Lewis Hancock, the McDermott, the McGowan, the McNair, the Marshall, and the Melvin. From the Gulf Shipbuilding Corporation in Chickasaw, Alabama, you have the Bears, the John Hood, the Van Valkenburg, maybe? Van Valkenburg? That sounds better that second time. Finally, from the Seattle Tacoma Shipbuilding Corporation, now the Todd Shipbuilding Corporation, you have the Gregory, the Jarvis, the Porter, the Longshore, the Cahoon, and finally the USS Rooks. Additionally, from somewhere from the Puget Sound Naval Yard, you also have the USS Shield. And that is a lot of ships. And many have very interesting service careers. And some would survive, some would sink, and some would fight in fights that would make their names immortal. But I'm not spinning that dit in this video. So, stay tuned for videos on those ships. So with all those ships I just rattled off, many people will not be surprised that some were definitely different. The USS Halford, Stevens, and Pringle would be completed with a catapult for a seaplane for long-range search for the task group, and this would remove Q turret, as you can see in the image on screen. But shockingly to any person who sort of knows about stability, that was not a good idea and was not effective. So, moving swiftly on, and I think the US Navy realised exactly the same thing, they would be refitted along the lines of a normal Fletcher-class destroyer. And by 1945, after the kamikaze threat was rising, the Ford torpedo tube launcher was deleted for 2 additional 40mm Bofors cannons, this time in quad mount, and all these upgrades were done before the end of the war. By the end of the Second World War, with 19 not surviving the war and 6 not being repaired, the ships that would be lost would include the USS Xavier, lost at the naval battle of Vella La Vella on the 6th of October 1943, the USS Strong was sunk on the 5th of July 1943, USS De Haven was sunk on February 1st, 1943, USS Pringle was sunk on April 16th, 1945, the USS Spence was sunk in Typhoon Cobra on the 18th of December 1944, USS Bronson was sunk by Japanese aircraft on the 26th of December 1943. That's a bad way to spend Boxing Day. The USS Luce was sunk by a kamikaze on May 4th, 1945. USS Abner Reed was sunk by a kamikaze on November 1st, 1944. USS Bush sunk by a kamikaze on April 6th, 1945. The USS Johnston was sunk by naval gunfire at the Battle of Samar on October 25th, 1944. The USS Longshore ran aground on May 18th, 1945 and was subsequently scuttled. USS Morrison was sunk by a kamikaze on May 4th, 1944. The William D. Porter was sunk by a lucky detonating kamikaze on the 10th of June, 1945. Obviously that ship, very, very famous for all the wrong reasons. The USS Halligan was lost after hitting a mine on March 26th, 1945. USS Twiggs was sunk by a kamikaze on June 16th, 1945. The USS Callahan was sunk by a K-5Y Willow kamikaze on July 28th, 1945. The USS Kowloon was damaged by a kamikaze beyond repair and was sunk by the USS Cassin Young on April 6th, 1945. And finally, the USS Little was sunk by a kamikaze on May 3rd, 1945. After the war, the vessels that survived would be decommissioned, with 39 being refitted to the Project SCB-74 Bravo. This refit would see a large pole mast be replaced by the tripod mast. The radar systems would change, with the SC/SG radar being replaced by the AN/SBS-10 surface search radar. Other additions would see ESM being fitted to the ships. The aft torpedo tubes would be removed and replaced with 2 lightweight Mark 44 anti-submarine warfare torpedo tubes, one port and one starboard. Finally, Hedgehog would be fitted to these ships to enhance the anti-submarine warfare capabilities. Now, some of these ships would serve in the Korean War before being decommissioned. Now, during the 1950s, many of the ships would also be ending up being sent to other navies, with 5 vessels going to Argentina, 7 going to Brazil, 2 to Chile, 1 to Colombia, 7 to Greece, 3 to Italy, 2 to Japan, 2 to Mexico, 2 to Peru, 3 to South Korea, 5 to Spain, 4 to the Republic of China, i.e. Taiwan, 4 to Turkey, and 6 to West Germany. The last serving Fletcher class would be the former USS John Rogers, and she left service in 2001 with the Mexican Navy. You can currently visit 4 Fletcher class vessels, with the USS The Sullivans in Buffalo, USS Kidd in Baton Rouge in Louisiana, USS Cassin Young is in Boston, and the Hellenic naval vessel Velso is currently in Greece, moored near the Giorgio Azaroff. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you learned something new. Don't forget to like the video before you leave a comment, and give a suggestion of what you think I should do next, as well as if you have a question you want me to answer, please put it in the comment section on the pinned post. Apart from that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I recommend doing so, because I have some very interesting content coming out very soon. If you want to support the channel, there is a Patreon page, but that's entirely up to you. If you do so, there is some interesting perks to actually being a Patreon to the page. Apart from that, all you need to do is say thank you very much, have a nice day, and here's a sneak peek at next week's video.